That's what I hear. All right, we're live on the page. Let me just share it out to the group and we'll get started. I had 7 o'clock. I don't know if I messed up or
Oh,
something.
did you? My bad.
Yeah, that's why I messaged you because it was in my calendar for 7. I put the thing for 7.
Oh, shoot. My bad. Damn it.
That's it's
Apologize.
it's all right. I was just sitting here. I'm like doing some shit, and then you popped up. I'm like, oh, okay. All right. Let me just get it shared out to the group. Are you in the group? I don't even know if you're in the group.
I think so. I'm pretty sure, because I've seen your content, so I'm pretty sure I'm.
A business not bullshit.
Think so. God, I have to admit, I've joined way too many groups all at once
I
to
know,
where I'm
right?
like,
I know. They just
I
start
need
keeping, and now you're gonna be joining all these different bot subscriber lists just to get like some PDF, and you're gonna get stuck in all that shit. Like, when you're in the marketing world, right? Like I just started seeing like I'm in so many bot sequences, it's really getting annoying. It's getting annoying. And then there's like a lot of people are doing like a group, like instead of doing a Facebook group, they'll do like a group messenger.
hmm
I just lose the conversation there because it's just like ding ding, like constantly on your phone. So I just end up muting the whole conversation. I never read
Yeah. No, that's too much.
it. All right, so we are live now on both the page and the group. Let me just refresh, make sure we're all set, and then we'll get started. Yo, Facebook has been loading slow for me all day.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. All right, let me check the group, and we'll be good to go. All right, guys. So, all right, yeah, we're good. So, I want to welcome Troy Johnston to Biz Not Bullshit. It's been a while since we spoke, really, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Um,
it has been a while.
and the reason why I invited Troy on was because he had, I guess it's been about a year almost now, right?
Yeah, almost about a year and like 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah. So about a year ago and change, he had exited his business for 7 figures, and we had started talking around that time. And I felt that recently in the group, there's been more interest in e-commerce. Um, and I felt, hey, let me get some other e-commerce people on here. So we've had Chelsea and Ari on. But I also want to kind of even dive in more, not only in the e-commerce side, because it's sure that was the vehicle that you used to exit, but there's a lot more involved in building a business to 7 figures, and that's irrelevant to what the product is or what you're selling. That a lot of people, whether they're building an agency or any other type of business, can learn from you. So, Troy, would you mind just like introducing yourself, talk a little bit about you, and then we'll start getting into it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. A little bit about me before I wasn't always an entrepreneur, so I kind of came from the corporate space. I was a project manager in a past life, and through kind of a series of events was led to the concept and the idea of leveraging Amazon. I was one of those folks that was thankfully introduced to ASM, kind of way back when it was not really a proven concept, but it was bittersweet. There wasn't a lot of validation, but it was also the Wild West. And so through a series of very fortunate events, I took the course, gobbled up all the materials, made a bunch of mistakes, and really pushed through. Was willing to kind of fail my way through the process, and built a business out of it. ASM was the seed, and enough capital, enough risk, enough willingness to, like I said, a lot of times it's romanticized that time of getting into Amazon because it was easier, but it was also not where it's at now, where the proof of concept is so validated that it's relatively formulaic. So built that business, built my flagship brand, which was Foxborough at the time, and that really got all of my time and energy for really the past going on 3.5 years. And more recently, after the sale of the business in February, I've been consulting with 8 and 9 figure businesses, high revenue, high volume sellers. And then more recently, I've teamed up with a group of extremely successful sellers, and we have kind of put together what we consider the really the number one Amazon optimization platform. That's what we want it to be. That's what we aim to deliver for our customers, and that's what we're tackling today. That's the next big challenge.
That's awesome. You said a couple of key things that I want to touch on because, coming from a background that's not entrepreneurial, like for me, I've always been in business, so I know the risk. How was it going from, hey, I have this job to saying, and it's not like you took an easy venture where what's minimal capital investment. Like I'm assuming on a product of the type that of your brand, you'd have to put in at least 5 to 10 grand just to get it started. Was that like a scary process for you coming from, hey, I have this job. Is this even gonna work? Should I put 10 grand into this new company? Like, how was that like mentally for you?
Yeah, no, I was not too far away from saying no to the opportunity. The way it actually went down is that I invested through, well, I synced up with an angel investor that we agreed to a 50-50 split, which right now sounds ridiculous, and probably should have known that in the beginning, but I also knew that, hey, there's this buzz coming out about this potential, these potential resources through ASM and all this upside and potential with Amazon. I am pretty risk averse, but I was fortunate, and this is where I'm a big believer in your network. I had a entrepreneurial friend who was on the other end of the spectrum that was willing to throw money at anything. Hey, you test out 10 things, one thing will stick, you scale it and grow it from there. Where I'm somebody I needed to see the rationale, I need to understand the logic. My project management brain sort of starts going, and the wheels start turning there. So I was very fortunate to have him as a voice of, is this a once in a lifetime opportunity? Yes, you're conceding, but you're also taking on a challenge that may be once in a lifetime. And so, yeah, I mean, it was a willingness to lend an ear to a voice that maybe logically didn't make sense to me, but I also saw the opportunity. Again, I was very fortunate. I had a pretty big safety net through my corporate work. But having said that, it was my network, my closest 5 friends that were like, hey, take advantage of this opportunity, who I went to for feedback, and they gave me the kick in the butt, and I had to sit down and make that hard decision of, hey, do I want to do I want to spend about that 10K, as you mentioned, which is right about what I invested, when again, we didn't know if it was going to work, right? You had to be willing to take that leap.
No, of course. And you're fortunate that, a lot of people starting don't have somebody to reach out to. So that's good that you had somebody to ask who actually invested with you to kind of mitigate that risk. Of course, hindsight being 2020, you're like, oh shit, well, what if, right? But, that is hindsight being 2020. So talk a little bit about, that first 12 months. Like what were the your first 12 months as an entrepreneur, where did you start? How did you end that first year? What were some of the tough lessons learned along the way?
Yeah, no, that first year I was still working full time. So even though I decided to take ASM, obviously there was plenty of time where I was taking the course materials, I was implementing some of the steps, but my 40 hours was committed to my full time work. So I would sneak away and call suppliers, in conference rooms at my work, and so try to get a little bit of that done in those initial stages. So I was definitely grinding. I mean, it was get my daytime job done, go home and implement what I was learning through ASM, and that really was the grind for a solid 6 to 8 months. And when I knew I was going to commit full time to my business, was I made up essentially said I just need to replace my income. Let's not overcomplicate things. If I see the trajectory, the path is there, the health and the growth of the business is there, I'm going to view it very logically, and it's going to be black and white, so I don't have to have that cognitive dissonance in terms of transitioning. So that took place, I say 6 to 8 months. It actually probably took place a little bit earlier than that. Business really started to take off when I committed more time and energy, and I started expending a bit more capital, but all of that was coming back to me. The business was throwing off a lot of money. And so I was really growing it from there, learning some of the lessons, adding products to the brand line, and really learning a lot of the same strategies that I recommend and implement today when it comes to going to a greater depth in your product line, really facilitating and cultivating brand equity and brand loyalty. And I was very fortunate because my brand took a hold with the audience and with with placement and optimization early on. So I was able to, in that 12-month span, I was able to move on to full-time commitment to the business, and then I was growing. And then towards the latter half of that year, I was looking at hiring and bringing people on the team to help with the workload and to better manage my bandwidth.
Awesome. Yeah, we're gonna get into the hiring and all that stuff. 'Cause that's an important part of exiting is having those things in place. But I do want to touch on how was it? So you said, hey, my goal is let's replace my income, right? So typically what happens with most entrepreneurs is they're living off their cash flow, but you didn't have to. So I'm assuming everything that was made was reinvested into your business. So did that hurt cash flow wise? Like all of a sudden having to take out whatever 5-6 grand a month just for salary now, like all of a sudden, or you had enough of a buffer where you're like, oh hey, you know what? I can start paying myself and I can still reinvest because it is a physical product business, right? So you have to invest in inventory and other things. So was that a factor that may have extended that to 6 or 8 months?
No, I think that's a great question for me, and this is some of the nuances of my circumstances that when I was sourcing products domestically, so my lead time was much shorter, so my cash flow was to me a lot easier to manage. Where if you're extending your lead time from instead of weeks to months or even just a month, it can get to be a bit more strenuous. And so you're right, I was reinvesting back into the business, and once it hit that really solid tipping point, because my cash flow was really dialed in, it really wasn't a big impact. And I was really, even though it was also hitting that point of replacing my income, I had to see the trajectory as well. Was I getting there in an upward trend, or was I just incrementally adding to my bottom line at the end of the day?
Makes sense. So let's talk a little bit about the brand. You had mentioned brand, and a lot of times people ignore branding, and especially in that world, there's a lot of ways to do it. You can build a brand with a deep product line, or you can just do random products, no brand awareness. How important do you think focusing on brand was initially, and then subsequently, how did it impact, your future sales and obviously your exit down the road?
Yeah, I think brand equity and brand loyalty are huge pieces in the equation, especially in the evolution of the landscape. For me, when I really created and crafted the brand and had a brand story and an avatar behind the customer, that really served us. The brand name was Fox Brim. I knew I wanted it to be something that had a stickiness factor to it. Once you hear it, you may not know exactly how to say it, but it sticks with you. It's not something natural. It's not, and most categories kind of fall prey to that, where you have the brand name that's just white noise. And so, I'm a student of advertising myself. So I always think about what has that stickiness factor. What's going to be something where if somebody sees a product on a shelf and there's 12 others, and Amazon is a compare and contrast landscape, you have to stand out. You're not viewed in isolation. Our products aren't siloed off. You're just stuck in a row with a bunch of other products, and at the end of the day, yours just has to stand out. And so we do that with imagery. I made sure when I came up with the brand name, it had some sort of imagery, some sort of key color. And so on the most simplistic level, that branding has to stand out. But then also, like I said, resonating, making sure, the fox had a leaf for the tail, and so it dovetailed into the organic and natural elements of it. So it was really well thought out, and we just got such great feedback from the people that were repeat buying. They were doing what they were saying, and so we had a lot of validation on the branding side as well.
That's awesome. And to touch on that, you keep dropping these little nuggets that I just want to pull out to make sure that people that are going to be watching live and are going to be watching the replay can realize the importance of it. You had mentioned, hey, you know what? We developed this brand, but once you really made that story and also the avatar, who you're speaking to, right? That really helped establish the brand and the message and accelerate sales, you feel. So talk a little bit about how you identified that avatar. What were some of the key things that you look at when looking at a brand and saying, all right, who am I speaking to? Just kind of give a quick overview of the best way to dial that in.
Yeah, no, and I think it's definitely a process that evolves, right? Because you have to always test your assumptions. One of the things we all fall prey to, and probably entrepreneurs, brand owners, we always assume, oh, our customer is this. And there's nothing wrong with starting with a hypothesis, right? Of saying they are this age, they're this demographic, they have these interests, they look out for X, Y, and Z for this type of product that I offer. And there's nothing wrong with starting off with the hypothesis, but being extremely receptive to feedback and what customers are doing. And you have to put what they're doing above what they say, because people don't always do what they say. We like to think we're logical, rational consumers, but that's sometimes not the case, if not often the times. And so you have to really be receptive to that. And so for us, it was making it tangible, making it specific, writing down what that information is. So that way, when we craft our marketing materials, we're not always going off of whimsy and how we feel that day or week. It's, okay, we've got to cross-check this against, this is who we're speaking to, this is where they're at in their lives, this is what they want in our products. And that way we can align those things, because when we talk about benefits and features of a product, in isolation, those things won't stand on their own 2 feet, but when you corroborate that with your avatar, that's really when you're clipping along. That's really where you hit that point of resonance to where, you can just show up in front of somebody and convert. You can earn that sale, as opposed to climbing that mountain of trying to create demand. We always want to avoid creating demand. That's the hardest thing in business. You want to meet the demand where it's at, and that's really where you find that avatar resonating with your with your brand and your product.
And I guess that's more so important because you were on a page with a bunch of other competitors. You didn't go into some obscure product. You went right for where there's a lot of players in the market, right? So I can see how that's important. You need to be able to pull out, like, they need to be able to see box brand, they need to see, oh, this is the benefits, and oh, hey, that's me. Let me click here and let me buy it. And at what point did you start making your effort to kind of build traffic outside to bring people to your listings on Amazon? Or did you even sell outside of Amazon? I don't even know if you did.
Yeah, so the website was accommodating orders pretty early on, but we were not driving much in the way of traffic specifically to the website. If we realized some low-hanging fruit, we would definitely leverage that, but we put a disproportionate amount of focus on Amazon. And really maintained that. We had a presence on Walmart, on Jet. We dabbled with some of the other marketplaces, but that was really incremental revenue. We really didn't try to figure out, because I see that a lot, and that's something I always recommend to sellers is, unless you really know it A to Z, the same way that you have an intimate knowledge of Amazon, don't just jump on a marketplace just to check off a box. I mean, you really need to commit the time and energy, because there's an opportunity cost there. You may be expending that where, take the largest commerce platform that's ever existed, and you have 10% gain there versus a 20% gain in Walmart and Jet. It's, the math has to be weighted appropriately. And we found that time and time again where, we maybe feel like, oh, let's try this new strategy to get more exposure on Walmart. But if we just committed that same amount of time for Amazon, it just paid so much more in the way of dividends.
No, that makes 100% sense. A lot of people, and even brands that aren't on Amazon, brands, they just want to jump into the next distribution channel, but each distribution channel will have to have its own, for lack of better words, dedicated department for it to be successful, right? You can't just rely on posting stuff up and hoping it sells. You need to understand it. And I guess that's really important for people to know, hey, if you're going to focus on that one thing, focus on what you do best. And if you're going to commit to expanding to other channels, other distribution platforms, make sure you understand them as well before dedicating that much time and energy to it.
Right.
Let's jump into some of the good shit. How at what point did you start hiring? So you had mentioned you left your full-time job around 6 to 8 months. In that time frame, I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, by year after the 12th month, around the 12th, 13th month mark, you're like, whoa, I'm starting to do a lot more customer service work. I'm starting to do a lot of this mundane stuff. I need to start bringing people on. If that's the case, great. But yeah, when did you start saying, hey, you know what, I need to start bringing on a team and start developing my in-house staff?
Yeah, it was honestly probably right around the 8 to 9 month mark. It wasn't too far. So as soon as I got out of the full-time work and was really focusing on my Amazon business, it became very clear that with my full-time focus, my bandwidth could be better allocated to scaling and growing and not, customer service. And obviously I was acutely aware of some of the other optimization things I could do as well. So I actually hired around that 8 to 9 month mark both the CS person and then what amounted to be the director of marketing. So somebody who was at the strategy level, but I also wanted to see that they were capable to be a tactician in the short term. So I really needed a rock star, and that's really what I look for. And I was very fortunate. I found one in that capacity. And at that point in the business, it was a force multiplier. She was really great at both driving the strategy and then implementing as a tactician.
Awesome. You hired in the States then?
I did, yeah, for the director of marketing, and then my CS person was also in the States. Another absolute all-star, and I've made plenty of hiring blunders. I failed my way through figuring out the process, and of course, even when you dial that in, you're dealing with people, and people can change, and times can change, but both of those two hires.
Let's get into some stories, man.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Real shit. This is some real shit, man. What mistakes did you make? Give us some war stories.
Well, I think it's always important to really, in hindsight, what I would say in terms of hiring horror stories is just making sure that when it comes to things like test tasks and references, is don't be scared to put somebody through, and that's probably not the right phrasing, to really properly vet somebody in a number of different facets. I feel like there was a point in time where I thought, man, I'm really taking up a lot of person's time, going through all these steps, and they probably think I'm just really cynical and like I don't think they're good enough for the job. But you've got to realize at the end of the day, when you're pouring in your blood, sweat, and tears into something, that you should expect for them to allow you to take your time, to really vet them, to really make sure, hey, I'm giving you everything in my company because I'm putting everything into it. Join me in this fight, and just making sure that they're the right fit. And so, in those hiring mistakes that I've made, it was usually not following through on references in the same way, or not adequately crafting and creating a test task. And now my hiring process is so dialed in that I've got it's systematic. I've got confidence in being able to do it, and I've hired on behalf of clients, and now I've again, and I think this is it's an entrepreneurial truism, right? You've got to be able to kind of fail your way through it. Hiring is no different, but make sure that you're receptive to what you've done wrong, and try to be cognizant of those specific pieces, because that's what I've really tried to do.
No, that's important, because you know what? A lot of people, when I first started hiring a long time ago, my brick and mortar businesses, it was just like, hire anybody that can breathe and I can show them how to do it. That quickly starts to crumble, especially when you start putting more and more responsibility on them because they're just not equipped for it. And a lot of people feel that, what people write on their resumes is true. Right? Like, I don't know if you've noticed that. A lot of people think that, if they wrote on the resume, it must be true. Like, yeah, they could do all this stuff. And then you find out that they can't do half the shit they said. So I think it's super important what you just said. And you kind of iterated how I do mine, where it's a multi-step process, right? So let's give them some real tactical stuff. So step one, put up a job posting wherever you're going to do that, right? Step two, for me, what I usually do is I'll do some type of filtration where I'll ask them to complete a minor task. Not necessarily relevant to the product, just to the job, but just to find out more information on it and have them answer some questions. And by the way they respond, they usually omit 70% gets omitted, and then I'll have them do a task, and then I'll do the interview. I mean, that's kind of like how I feel is like a good process to go through, and it's kind of I'm assuming similar to what you're saying is, hey, you know what? Take the time, go through the steps, because at the end of the day, if you hire wrong, you waste a lot more money than if you spend a little bit more time to hire right.
Right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the big things that I emphasize now too is setting a criteria. That initial filter is something that, and it does sound like you do this as well, is that when you set up that initial filter, you don't get inundated. Especially if you're in early stages of your business, your bandwidth is something you really want to be careful with. So you just don't want to be flooded with inquiries. So if you make it very black, white, this is what we need. Are you it? Are you not? And then that allows them to pass through the next steps. I think that's important as well. And again, I'm as guilty of that as anybody else is. There was a time where it was open season. Hey, if anybody's interested, send me. And then you have hundreds of people interested in a single position, and you're left to filter through that. And there may be diamonds in the rough, but you only have so much time in the day.
you can't, because that becomes a job in itself, filtering 150 resumes. I don't even read them because I know, like, hey, whatever you wrote there is half bullshit. So just take this quick questionnaire, and then the ones that it's surprising how many people will just post this stuff, and then they'll never fill out the questionnaire. It's
Right.
like, okay, you just saved a lot of time. Like, who cares what the resume says? Do the filter. That's important. But whatever you're hiring, right? All right, let's move on. So, as far as all right, now you got two employees under your belt. Let's kind of you sold at year 3 or year 4.
It would have been year four. Year four.
All right, so what happened? Like, what are some key lessons as far as because I'm assuming you had more than 2 team members, towards the exit. So how was that trajectory of hey, all right, now I'm delegating these tasks. What was your focus at that time, and then what was your team's focus? In that 2.5 to 3 year period, where you started expanding product line and aggressively growing. What are some of the challenges and struggles for doing that? And just kind of speak on how you accelerated your team.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I always aim to have an eye for scale, so the parts and pieces that were going to be needed for that. And so while the team remained small, we leveraged a lot of resources initially. And then really, I did start to kind of build out the ideal hierarchy I wanted to have in the company. And it really, on the most simplest level, it's being cognizant of the strategy and the tactician. And so making sure that there's accountability at both of those levels, but there's enough bandwidth committed to where you have a higher level of certainty of performance. So with us always reinforcing efforts on Amazon, being process driven, we were able to stay relatively lean. I think in the next few months, we hired a marketing coordinator. So that was somebody that was then underneath the director of marketing, who was the true tactician. And so we had the strategy, we had the tactician. And again, not to say at the strategy level she wasn't implementing things, but there was enough latitude there that we could continue to scale. We're not all just head down doing, getting bogged down in the minutia. We're able to shift gears with that type of structure. Then I started deploying a few more VAs, because we were fleshing out some of the processes. So being cognizant of redundancies and potential efficiencies, we would leverage VAs. And so we started to tap, I think at that point in time, not too long after, we had 2 VAs, but they were all extremely task driven. And so that's something I would definitely keep in mind, especially sort of in the gig economy, is that if things are extremely task oriented, it can be a bit disheartening to somebody domestically to continue to do those things weeks and months and potentially years on end. Where somebody in a VA capacity is kind of used to that and maybe happy with that type of setup, where you can pay them well, you can incentivize them. I always look for ways to incentivize quality of work and deliverables. And so that's really where things started moving, is with that coordinator position and the VAs that were addressing some of the redundant processes. We stayed pretty lean, and we were still operationally sound. We weren't having many lapses in what we were doing, and people were thinking we were a 20, 30 person company, but we were able to still really effectively manage the workload.
No, that's awesome. The task-oriented processes, start bringing on offshore VAs, keep the creative stuff in the States. And what were you doing at that time? Because you started filling up the teams. What was your task as the CEO? Did you ever end up replacing yourself as CEO before you exited, or did you stay as CEO the whole run?
I did stay in, and really my aim was continually to be tapped into optimization to help with scale, general admin items in terms of continuing to hire, continue to team build. And I really enjoyed that part as well, staying engaged with the team, is to try to cultivate the growth and the culture, because we really did have a great team, even though there was at the end of the day, 5 or 6 of us on site. We still had a really great, fun culture. Enjoyed doing things together. Had perks. I made sure that the team was enjoying their work, and so that can definitely be a challenge, especially again in one of my first ventures that really experienced a lot of growth really fast. Is not making sure that people feel too much change in their life. They want a bit of certainty in what they do, and so even though we were clipping right along, you kind of had to be that voice of like, things are still good, nobody, there's not going to be too much uncertainty in the work environment.
No, that's super important, and that comes from the top down. Building culture. What were some key things you did to build that culture? To kind of give the audience some insight in how they can, even if they have in-house or remote teams, what are some cool, fun things you could do to kind of build that culture to make sure that your team stays, happy and satisfied? It's not always about money.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a lot of small things is what I find to work best. And so whether it's ownership of things that perceivably would come from me, so whether that's driving in high level internal meetings, whether that's driving meetings with key partners, if we had vendors where they would expect for me to drive that conversation, I'd have a member of my team. And that always instills a lot of confidence in the team and the team members, right? Where they get to act on your behalf as the member and sort of the leader of the team, and that really reinforces a positive internal culture. And then when it comes to kind of working in a remote team, another little thing is just having video chats, is making sure that the people stay connected. So when they're engaging, with VAs or again, I had somebody remote that was domestic but not with us, is having those video calls and making sure, hey, that you're interacting with a person. When you're slacking somebody, it can get to be very impersonal. But that really helps with the culture as well. People enjoy small talk. They like talking around the water cooler, and you can miss that in a remote environment. So I think communication is key. Is not being so overpowering with when it comes to empowering others to lead in maybe a step above their capacity. And then just little things where going out to lunch, going team outings, just thinking of ways where people can decompress with you. Because then they let their guard down and it becomes more of a personal thing. You're already spending more time with these folks than you are most of your loved ones. So thinking about what's going on in their lives, how you can better them, it just serves to create that really great culture.
Yeah, actually give a shit.
Yeah. People appreciate that if you can imagine.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, because those are key things for people to know. And a lot of people overlook that. A lot of people, get angry if stuff's not done right, and things just like little things like that. I think really like from what I've learned in my experience and hiring and dealing with customer service, all that stuff. You just need to keep a cool head. You need to understand your employees, where they're coming from, and you need to provide you need to have engaging conversation. And it can't just be oh, are you showing, like, what are your tasks for today? You need to like find out about them. And I like the retreats and like go hanging out, doing like the meetups and stuff like that. Those are always great. All right, let's jump into the sale, man. When did you say, hey, I want to sell this thing? What happened? How did that come about? Like, give us some details, and I'm gonna pry some more information out.
Oh man, when I was ready to sell, there conversations were being had. Let's see, because I sold in February of 17. In Q4 of 16, I was starting to have a lot more conversations, a lot of private equities, a lot of brand owners. It was just I was becoming more open about the idea. And so, it was very eye-opening to see kind of the different types of potential buyers. Private equities come in and they kind of have their own agenda. It can be a little bit less personal. It can be a little less. It can be more rigid, and that was not really appealing to me. I really wanted to make sure that the brand ended up in, it's kind of your baby. I spent a lot of time on it, and I really grew it to be a really serious. At that point in time, it was a global business. I mean, we were having conversations with vendors in India, China. Like, we were getting that global demand. And so, I really wanted to make sure that who was going to take over that brand next really understood what we had done as a team, and we're going to take good care with the brand moving forward. So I was really fortunate. It was through my network again where with those conversations being had, they caught wind that I was having other conversations, and through my network found out that they were trying to buy. Try to consolidate a few different brands and kind of create a portfolio. And it moved so quick. I was ready for an elongated due diligence. I was ready for, I was readying myself for the worst, and the process itself could not have been better. Those guys came in, understood what we've done, had a vision themselves, were able to speak to what they wanted to do. We're seeing the culture that we had, and weren't going to weren't going to screw up what was built thus far. And so, I kind of got at peace with it, made up my mind it was the right move. The numbers made sense, the timing made sense. It was great. It was great the way that it all came together, because, like I said, the conversations I was having, it was almost like, man, do I really want to do this? Like, I've got a really great brand, I've got a great team, we all know what we're doing, and so the potential is all still there. All the parts and pieces are there. But it was the right buyers. It was the right buyers, the right time, and the right numbers.
Yeah, because you could have said, a lot of people, and this is what a lot of people don't get about selling businesses. A lot of people are like, well, if it's making money, why would you ever sell it, right? Like, you're pocketing maybe 50 grand a month or whatever it is, right? Oh, it's making really good money. Who would ever get rid of that? But then when you have private equity firms coming in and other buyers coming in saying, hey, we want to give you 8, 9 million or whatever the max, people don't realize that, you can take 8 or 9 million or 7 million or 5 million and do a lot of things with that, especially with the cash up front, more so than you could with making 50 grand in your pocket a month or 100 grand in your pocket a month, right?
Right.
So, fortunately, those private equity firms, you didn't go that route, because that would have been your long due diligence process, a whole mess there. And from what you said, hey, it was important for you to make sure that your team, your product was taken care of, right? So talk a little bit about, valuations, numbers. How does the process work when you're selling a business of that size, and just your experiences in that aspect of it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I saw, I was presented with a pretty far-ranging numbers when it came to valuation at the end of the day, and some of that is to be expected. Private equity, they're very rigid in that sense as well, in terms of, okay, we're looking at EBITDA, we're coming in at maybe 1x EBITDA or something very low. At least that's what I was seeing at that time. And so it was far easier to get creative in conversations with potential brand owners, because they had the value add, where the private equity was overtake and squeeze whatever they could out of the business, right? Yeah. And so again, that was part of what was compelling for me, but then also the valuation seemed to mirror that. So it was it made it easier for me at the end of the day, because, like I said, the valuations were richer. But that's why I was so fortunate that they were on the same footing. Valuations were great. The brand was being put in great hands. And again, not to sully private equities, because that's a space that I'm getting more and more familiar with. But they do things a certain way, and whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, you just kind of have to come to expect it and handle it on a case by case.
Yeah. They don't want anything that bad, right? Yeah. They're just like, 5 million is another drop in the bucket. If they don't want to do the deal, fuck it, we'll move on to the next one. And that's what they do, right? And like you said, it wasn't about maximizing the brand. It wasn't about their mind wasn't hey, there's a potential here. Like, obviously, a lot of people don't buy a potential, but some people have value adds, as you said, that were like, hey, if I take this and I already have this other process, or I already know how to add value to this business, I know that, hey, even if it's doing $2 million a year, I can buy the next 12 months. It'll be doing $5 million a year, so it'll make sense for them. Whereas private equity, they don't give a fuck. They're just gonna, do what they do. But that's a great option too if that comes around. So that's awesome, man. Because a lot of people go through painful processes in buying and selling businesses. So you're fortunate that went very smooth.
That's right.
Very smooth.
Yes.
For you. So let's before we wrap it up here, I do want to kind of for the people that are going to catch the replay and everything, talk about what you're doing now. Because I know you consult with companies, you have a software. For the people that are interested in possibly getting into Amazon, where do they reach you? What are you doing now? And all those kinds of things.
Yeah, man. So now what we're really focused on is seller.tools. Myself, I'm a co-founder with Brendan Morris, another seller. far smarter than I am. He's a great partner in
He's
the
a fucking
business.
shark, man.
He is. He's great, man. So I don't know. For some reason, he brought me in and said, "Hey, let's do this." And we have a great team behind the software and the platform. And really, what we're trying to do is shake up the space a little bit. We've kind of been underwhelmed with optimization options, and we really kind of figured out, hey, what's all the things that are our pain points? Because as relatively high volume, high revenue sellers, if these are things that we're dealing with, we've got to think that this is resonating with everybody else. And so we brought actual Amazon data. You can manage more of it. We've got exclusive features like relevancy percentage, TSI. We've got accurate giveaway numbers. We've got actual exact and broad impression data from Amazon. So all these things that we're like, hey, we would like fantasize about actually having access to, we've brought into this platform, and Seller.tools is really just that. And so, as I was mentioning to you, we're getting close to about 1,000 signups. So we're really pumped that just a few months in that it's resonating with folks. So if you're just starting out, our pricing, we are a little bit on the premium side, but use the data. It's getting to be the reality of the space is if you have a commoditized product, you have to win the optimization game. You just have to. There's no reason for somebody to buy your product over anybody else's unless it's just happenstance, and that's no way you want to run a business is by chance. And that's really what we try to do is make sure that we put Amazon data in sellers' fingertips and they can make the absolute most of it. So really passionate about that project. And ZonSpark, my consulting, that's really what led me to begin Seller.tools. Working kind of in a high touch capacity with 8 and 9 figure high volume, high revenue sellers there as well, and that's been great. I love the work that we've done with ZonSpark, but yeah, Seller.tools is the future, man. We're really excited about the implications.
That is or already has approached the $1 million business, correct?
It's clipping right along, man. It's clipping right along.
Okay, so we may be having you back for another maybe 8 or 9 figure exit down the road. No, that's awesome. You know what? You like when you go through that process, you start seeing the pain points, and a lot of times these softwares they come about of people's pain points, and it's great that you can help other people also make money for yourself, and really you built a community around it. So what I want to also do is for anybody that's interested in following Troy and Brendan, I'm going to drop a link to your group for people to kind of catch your stuff, because you don't only just talk about your software in your group. You talk a lot of strategy. You do a lot more in your group than just say, oh, here's the software, here's the stuff. Like, so I wanted people to connect with you. Do you have any final comments or thoughts that you want to give, some advice you want to give to people that are, building their brands and looking to possibly exit down the road?
Yeah, man. Well, thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Yeah, if you guys want to join us, like I said, like I've all said, we really try to give valuable content there as well, so you guys can take that actionable insights into your business. But if you're starting on your journey, I mean, again, talking about what I've been very fortunate to do in my journey myself is that I've made plenty of mistakes. It's very easy when I have conversations to talk about the success and the numbers, but I've been an imperfect person, business owner, entrepreneur throughout that entire process. So be willing to fail your way through, keep moving forward. And yeah, I mean, that's some of the content I'm going to be dropping here soon is really encouraging people to really rough your way through something. Be willing to own the rough edges, and you can always refine at a later date. But when you're in the marketplace, when you're adding value, it's all about progress. It's not about perfection. So, yeah, man, I really appreciate you having me on.
That's important. It's all about progress, not perfection. A lot of people get stuck, in, oh, everything has to be perfect before I launch. And, with these interviews and like all the interviews you've done prior and like all the ones you see, everyone just talks about the highlights, the greatest moments. But there's a lot of shit that happened in those 4 years that you're like, fuck, I don't know if I'm going to get through the next day. I don't want to deal with this. So, that happens, guys. Keep that in mind. But, Troy and Brendan, they offer some solid advice. They have a great platform. If you're interested in learning from these guys, I put the link below the video for you catching on the replay. Feel free to join their group and, get engaged. There's so many ways to make money in this online space. A lot of people, do e-commerce, other people do agency, other people, there's so many ways to do it. These are great guys to know if you're looking to go into that space. And if you guys have any questions, just, drop comments later, PM me, and I'll get them answered for you.
Awesome.
All right. All right, Troy. So that's it for tonight. Thanks, guys, for joining. The ones that watch live, and anybody, like I said, replay, just type comment replay and ask your questions later. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys.